Alrighty, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ezra. I'm the Director of Outreach and Training at VPLC. And you might have joined us for a coffee chat before in the past, whether that was one legislative related or not. Welcome back. If this is your first time, welcome. Today we have our Executive Director, Jay Spear, talking about wrapping up the legislative session. Now that it's over, where did we land with all the policies that we supported or were against? And so you notice that we are recording this today, and it will actually be uploaded to our YouTube channel later on once it's done processing on Zoom. So be on the lookout for that. And so really, without further ado, not much from me. I know that there are a couple advocates also on the call. If y'all ever want to chime in the chat or unmute, please do so. And the same goes for you all. If you have a question, please do put it in the chat. This is also, a chance for you to kind of ask the questions you have about session, all things related session. If you have any questions or need any assistance from me, I'm in the background. I'm labeled as VA Poverty Law Center. You can either send me a message directly or just put it in the chat and let me know what you need, and I will help out on my end. But now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jay to give us our chat for today. Thank you, Jay.
All right, thank you, Ezra, and thank you everybody for joining us. And we do have some of our advocates who know a lot more about some of these subjects than I do. So I feel free to chime in if I'm saying something incorrectly or correcting or further explanation. This is a summary of some of the bills that we worked on to pass, amend, or defeat. I mentioned a couple of bills we worked to defeat because they were particularly harmful to our clients. The budget has still not been resolved, as you probably know. We have a separate list of our priorities that were included in either the House or the Senate budget, but I'm not really going to discuss those today just because I didn't think that was too much to try to cover in one coffee chat. And we'll see what happens. Maybe we might consider doing another coffee chat after the budget passes. So go ahead and go to the next slide, please, Ezra. And go another one, please. So there's just some pictures of our advocates in action. Next one, next slide, please. So housing is the first subject we're going to talk about. 2023 was not a good year for housing legislation, which I don't think is any particular surprise to anybody after what happened last year. We did get some housing legislation passed last year, but the governor vetoed several things. And we tried some of the same bills this year, but I guess the House was anticipating that the governor was going to veto them anyway, and so didn't pass them. A few things that did pass, though, however, was this first bill was about security deposits. And what we have on the slide there is a clear process for refunds. Don't get too excited because it's really kind of limited. This is a situation where the dwelling unit isn't habitable on the move-in date. So it's typically, I can't remember, one of the Northern Virginia legislators put this in, maybe it was Delegate Bull, but I can't remember. But anyway, it was all about people who rent a place without actually having online and not having a chance to see it. And then when they put down a security deposit and then they find that the place is uninhabitable. Unfortunately, it does not deal with the very real problem that our clients have, which is it seems to me the landlords almost never return security deposits, and we will continue to work on that issue. Rent increases. This requires landlords to provide a separate 60-day notice of any rent increase that happens automatically upon lease renewal. Also, very watered down to what we really wanted, but it is some progress. Lease termination requires a landlord terminating more than 20 or 50% of their month-to-month leases, whichever is greater, within a 30-day period to provide a 60-day termination notice to each tenant. Again, not a huge move forward, but definitely some progress. we really have got to get away from month-to-month leases. It's just not fair to families that to have to be forced to be so unstable. And then finally, the summons for unlawful detainer form. If you're not familiar with this, but this is the court form that's used for an eviction. Unfortunately, labeled an unlawful detainer, which is just based upon centuries-old legalese. But I think this is a pretty good bill because it requires the e-filing subcommittee of the Supreme Court access to Justice Commission to develop plain English instructions as to that explain to defendants how this works. I see this as a very important issue because so many people are pro se, don't have lawyers, don't understand what's happening to them, and don't understand these forms. So I'm really hoping this leads to some good changes in that. Next slide, please. So nursing home staffing, an issue that we have worked on, and also many other groups have worked on, particularly the AARP, for many, 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 many years. This legislation that passed was the nursing home industry bill. So as you can guess, not a great bill. We tried to close some of the loopholes in the bill because it just exempts so many facilities from this required staffing. But we were unsuccessful with that. The nursing home industry is apparently a very strong lobby, very difficult to defeat. This particular bill doesn't go into effect until next year. Is that 25? It says 25, so maybe 2 years from now. If that's correct, I think it is. But so anyway, that fight will, I'm sure, continue. Next slide. So guardianship. There were 3 bills that passed on guardianship, all good bills. The guardianship process sort of came under scrutiny a few years ago when it was found that there were a lot of people who had the same guardian, and that the hospitals were basically paying someone to be their guardian, and the guardians weren't really doing much to monitor what was happening with folks that they were guardian over. And these 3 bills put some requirements in there. The first one, restriction of visitation, creates notice requirements when a guardian is going to restrict incapacitated person from visitation information on how to appeal that action in person. So this arises out of many bills over the last few years, family members fighting over who gets to see dad, that sort of thing. The next is guardian visitation of incapacitated persons. Creates obligation of the guardian or designee to visit or video with the individual under guardianship 3 times a year. Again, stemming from this idea that there were institutional guardians who were not visiting or paying any attention to the incapacitated person, and so it put some requirements on there. Pretty minimal requirements, but requirements nonetheless. And then the last one is periodic review hearings. Creates the presumption of a 1-year review of a guardianship after it's implemented, and review every 3 years after that. It requires them to evaluate if the person still needs a guardian and if the guardian is doing an adequate job. Again, kind of minimal things, but surprisingly, I think a lot of people will probably be surprised to know that we never had those requirements before. Next slide. So then the first one there is child abuse and neglect, a definition of independent activities. And if you look at that picture there, it's a screenshot of streaming when they streamed this hearing. And this young person, I don't know how old she is, but she was telling the Senate Judiciary Committee she safely traveled to and from the library, but was observed by police who later appeared at her door and made her fear that she would be taken from her parents. This was a truly bipartisan bill. There's definitely a feeling that some child protective service workers have gone overboard with this. You shouldn't be taking or threatening to take kids away from parents just because they engage in independent activities. I mean, there's been all sorts of stories about, and this is a great story in itself, but there's even worse stories about kids, being threatened to take away because they're climbing trees and stuff like that. So this was good legislation. Basically what it says is that you can't take the child. Um, it clarifies that no child whose parent or other person responsible allows the child to engage in independent activities without adult supervision shall, for that reason alone, be considered to be an abused, neglected, or exploited child. So, and then the next thing on there, extending protective orders. Um, this legislation provides a process for a hearing on a timely filed motion to extend a protective order to occur even after that underlying full protective order has expired. Sounds like a lot of technical stuff, but these changes can be really important as far as protecting women who need protective orders, need protected, often are proceeding by themselves. In the court process, it's really important to pay attention, which we do, and we have for many years, to make sure that it's a friendly and easy court process, so that the people can be protected by these orders and not get caught up in a complicated judicial system that they don't understand. Next slide. All right, insurance policies or healthcare. This is something we've worked on for several years. This eliminates the tobacco surcharge, which you may think at first blush is not a good idea, but what this bill will do is it will lower health insurance costs in the individual market. Low income and rural Virginians are more likely to smoke and have some of the highest uninsured rates in the state. Tobacco surcharges were originally intended to promote smoking cessation, but they have been shown to simply keep people out of coverage and unable to access care, including free preventative care and smoking cessation programs. And this will be effective in January. I think it says July 1, but I think it's January 1, 2024. Next slide. Food assistance. So there was a big push to provide universal free meals in our public school system. Unfortunately, that failed. However, these three bills will help eligible individuals access food security programs. Enrolling in SNAP and/or free reduced school meals also helps the school or school system meet the 40% participation requirement to be a community eligibility school or school system. So in other words, if you can get 40% of your students are participating as eligible, then it gets the school-wide participation. So there's three things here. The first House bill requires SNAP information sheet and/or free reduced meal applications to be given. The second one requires schools to have applications for free and reduced school lunches available at all school-wide events. And then the third directs the Virginia Department of Social Services to provide SNAP information, resources, and education to food banks. So all good bills, obviously not as good as just having universal free meals in our public school system, but again, definitely a move forward. Next slide. And I see I'll answer. I'll wait till I get to the end, which is very close. I'm almost done, and then we'll go about answering questions. But yeah, go ahead and put them in the chat so we'll have them. And then consumer. The first bill had to do with towing. This was not a bill that we requested, but it was put in, and so we ended up doing a lot of work on it. What it does is if you have your vehicle towed and you've got personal items in there, such as your child's car seat or your car or your cell phone or whatever it might be, your medicine, the towing company can't refuse to give you access to get your stuff out. But because what happens is you got folks who can't afford the towing fee, which is typically $175 plus. Right, they can't afford it right away, but they need their medicine or whatever right away. So, and the towing company can't prevent you from getting that stuff before you pay the full fee. it seems like a no-brainer, very hard fought by the towing companies who claim they weren't against it, but then fought against it anyway. And then the Home Solicitation Sales Act. This has to do with um, if somebody comes to your home and sells you something, the door-to-door salesman, but it's more sophisticated these days. But the pressure put on you to agree to a sale um, had led to the Home Solicitation Sales Act, which I believe passed in the 1970s, gives you a 3-day right to cancel. And we didn't think there's anything wrong with the act, but several companies tried to change it, and they did successfully change it. We did keep them from completely gutting the act, so I was happy about that. And we got a lot of help from the Attorney General's Office Consumer Division, so we appreciate that. Next slide. So college student transcripts, something we've been fighting the last 2 or 3 years. It was legislation prohibiting universities from withholding student transcripts from former students who owe them a debt did not pass again. However, we are hoping for language in the state budget that will help students get their transcripts. It was in the House budget, so there's a chance that might get in there. We were surprised to find that there was something like 80,000 students affected by this. You've passed I talked to a woman just before the last hearing on this who had completed 3 years at a Virginia university and couldn't get her transcripts because she failed to pay her last semester when she had to drop out. And then utility rates. This is something we've been fighting again for many, many years. I consider this a pretty big win. Obviously, it's not. Our advocates who worked on it keep telling me that it's not what they wanted, but it's clearly an advance. And when you're fighting somebody has so much power in the General Assembly as Dominion, it's tough to get any kind of win. And so the State Corporation Commission will have expanded authority to set rates for Appalachian Power and Dominion, and it's effective in July 1st. And then last slide, I think. Next. These are a couple of things that legislation we defeated. The Virginia Employment Commission tried to have a bill put in to reduce appeal times on their decisions from 30 days to 15 days. A real slap in the face of due process, plus the people who need this unemployment benefits, in our opinion. But after a hard-fought fight, they had to pull their bill due to our opposition and the Legal Aid Justice Center and others. And then the second one on there is this earned wage access. A lot of people don't know what this is, but basically it's workers paying to be paid. Folks who there's all kinds of, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry now to provide a way to get your paycheck. You're not getting paid till next Friday, but you got to pay your rent today. So you can there's all kinds of ways that they do this service. Sometimes the employers pay for it. Other times you have to pay for it. Other times they play this game where you're only tipping and not really paying for it and all this nonsense. But it's nothing more than the end around our lending laws. We did not bring this bill. The industry brought it. They were trying to legitimize what they're doing. And that was also a very hard fought fight, but in the end, we defeated the bill. Shortly after we defeated this bill, we saw stats from California. California has regulated this industry, and they got stats from 6 million borrowers, which found that the average person gets 36 a year of these advances. And it's an even bigger problem than we thought. And so we were glad we defeated that. So with that, I will open it up to questions. There's our crew again. So there's probably some in the chat, right? Let's see.
Yeah, I see one in the chat from Anne.
Yeah.
Says, are the food assistance applications available in languages other than English?
All right. Is there anybody on here that can answer that? Nope. Sorry, I can't really answer that.
We
were
can
somewhat
always
short-
follow up and get the information and send it out afterwards.
Yeah, sorry about that, Ann.
That's all right, just curious. We are assisting a lot of Afghan refugee families who are eligible for those benefits, but when it comes to the applications, like for school stuff, you know, they may not have as much facility with the English language sufficient to complete those kinds of things. So I'll wait to hear more from you later.
All right, yeah, I'll get back. We'll get back to you on that. Any other questions?
While people are maybe thinking of any last minute questions, just to remind everyone, this is recorded and will be put on our YouTube channel so you can review it later. And any questions, such as Ann's question, that you might ask that we don't know the answer right now, I'll be sure to check in with all of our advocates and get that information so that I can share it afterwards. So in a follow-up email, you'll get the link to the recording of this coffee chat if you want to revisit, and then any answers to the questions. And then I'm also happy to share a PDF version of these slides so that you can have them.
So are there any of our advocates on here that want to call me out for saying something wrong or?
Hi, Jay.
And so,
This is Dana.
go ahead.
I think the only thing I would say in particular about our advocacy around the Dominion and APCO bills is that it's not that we didn't have a win. We did have a really big win, and it took a lot of effort, and I don't think we would have ever gotten so far in that process without having been involved for this, since 2016. What I will say, though, is that we weren't able to prevent bills from going up. And I think consumers themselves will still feel the pain of last year's fuel factor costs because they are straight pass-through costs. They will still feel that this summer, those increases will go through. But there will be 2 rate cases this year as opposed to 1. And we hope to be able to make some cases to pull things down. Dominion also did get a rate increase in that legislation. And so that's it's tough. Their debt to income ratio went down, but their rate went up. And so we made gains for the long haul, but for the short term, people will still feel the problems.
Okay, thanks. And somebody had their hand up, I think. Was it?
That was me,
Becky?
Becky Bowers on there. Hey, I just, in dealing with rumors and innuendos, I was wondering if you have any rumors or innuendos about the budget, where it is, when it's going to be released, other than the thanks, Sally, the pressure that the Senate's putting on for not cutting taxes, et cetera.
Right. I don't have any particular insight on that. I don't know if anybody else does, other than what I've read. I think I've heard the same thing. It's the fight over the corporate tax cuts that's laying things.
Allie, you usually find stuff out. What do you know?
Rumor, definitely just mostly rumors. And just they're all hyper focused on the elections, and they're going to delay it until they can't delay it anymore, is sort of the attitude I've heard when I have asked about this, but I don't know for sure.
That's tough with the primary being June 20th and the end of the fiscal year occurring 10 days later. Whew.
Thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you, everyone. Hope you have a wonderful day.